Do you know? 3 of the worst losses in U.S. history. 2 of them are about us. Worst of all, the capture of the capital of the United States. President flees. The White House burned down. The 3rd worst Korean War. June 1950. A civil war broke out between the North and the South. On the Korean Peninsula, in a few days, U.S. invades North Korea and manipulate the UN Security Council. Resolutions passed in the absence of the USSR. Organization of the United Nations Army. Expand the war of aggression. Attend the Common Military Festival Victory. Until September, U.S.-led United Nations forces land in Incheon. Turn of events. And cross the 38th parallel to the Sino-North Korean border. Serious threat to our security. After the volunteer army crossed the Yalu River mightily. The defeat of the U.S. military begins. Just a few weeks. The volunteer army has passed 3 major battles, hit the 38th parallel, reoccupied Seoul, which is today's Seoul. According to post-war statistics, U.S.-led United Nations, the minimum loss of personnel is more than 570,000. Volunteers killed more than 2/3. The combat power can be said to be quite vigorous. Give us a thumbs up. U.S. troops suffered heavy losses in this war. It is also the war that the U.S. military is least willing to bring up. Worst Second Vietnam War. Is there anything worse than the Korean War? That's the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was the most fought by the United States. Since World War II, worst war. I thought it would be easy to defeat the North Vietnamese. The U.S. military that launched the war of aggression. Never expected. He has been fighting on this land for more than 10 years. Not only failed to win, but also dragged down by the war. According to post-war statistics, U.S. war against Vietnam cost at least $250 billion. U.S. domestic inflation. Worsening economic environment. Raising anti-war sentiment among Americans. Can only be forced to withdraw. Not only did the United States not help South Vietnam defeat North Vietnam. Instead, South Vietnam was defeated by North Vietnam. This also declared that the United States in the Vietnam War utterly ended in failure. What's the worst thing about losing a battle? That must be the fall of the capital. Worst, no. One American-Canada War. The United States has also treated its neighbors. Canada has had a bad idea. In 1812, the newly established United States, while Britain was busy with the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. I think Canada was still a British colony at that time. Launched a war of aggression. Attempted territorial expansion. America's confident. Fewer British troops stationed in Canada. Canadians must also want to overthrow British rule. No one thought this war triggered stubborn resistance from Canadians and British troops. A self-organized militia formed by a large number of Canadians rushed to the battlefield, even Native Americans. Indians also joined the Canadian camp. This is 3 years. This led to the deployment of a large number of U.S. troops on the front lines. The rear is empty. British troops who later withdrew from the European battlefield, landing on the east coast of the United States, and hit all the way to Washington, the capital of the United States. The British Army burned, killed, looted, and set fire everywhere. The White House and the Capitol were destroyed by fire. U.S. President Madison can only flee. The capital is completely occupied by the British Army. This declared the war of aggression launched by the United States. Total failure. Later, the two countries signed a treaty. America no longer has the guts to wage war on Canada. This is also the history of Canada, the only war that was invaded by foreign enemies.